So I'm curious, both of you I know as visual artists primarily, but now more and more people are moving to film. So I'd love to hear what drew you to these other mediums and kind of what was the impetus for you making that just expansion of your expression for both of you, Sheila and Fahim.
For me, I've been doing still photography since the late 90s, and I feel that I need to incorporate film because I think I can speak more through film instead of you seeing a one-dimensional still image on the wall. Because even though my images of protest images, I really consider them as portraits because that's what I do as a portrait photographer. But I think that film can really open up some other doors for me in some of the things that I would like to do.
Interesting.
Yeah, and similarly, you know, really just thinking through mediums as something other than, you know, materials that we use, but the ways in which different mediums communicate ideas to us. And so as I think through projects, I often think about, maybe this concept works better as a painting, or this concept works better as a recorded audio piece. This concept may work better as a film. So I never allow the medium to dictate my concepts as opposed to, you know, the other way around. And film just became a sort of natural progression for me through some of the other aspects of the ways in which I work. You know, my work is often very performative, and so film lent itself very much to that.
So it's interesting. Film is so powerful as a medium, and obviously you know this as a documentarian, but it seems like you also get a chance to reach a much broader audience that might not see you in the museum or in a particular exhibition. So you're using kind of your creative impulses in a much broader playing field. I'm curious about how each of you, and I'd like each of you to speak to this, how each of you feel like you've been changed by the very nature of the work you do. I don't want to say more.
Yes, I have been totally changed. Working with these artists and creating art was just a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Going through the things, you know, when I look back at the film, I see like where I am in the corner and where I am off camera, just in those moments of all the things that they're going through. And I don't know how you can live in this world, in this time that we are, and not be changed. And when you're with people who are writing about the times, it is just like a special experience that you just want to take hold and do your best to present that to a world. And like you said, a larger audience. I just was moved by the experience, and we just wanted, as filmmakers, to do our best job to have this body of work that showed what was going on and what these poets were feeling and how we were feeling about what they were doing. It was a beautiful and incredible experience. I wouldn't change it for the world.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, I have much respect for that. Because for me, as a photographer and been on the ground for the last 5 years, it's very, very emotional. Being in these communities, I saw the terror, I saw the trauma, I saw the anxiety, and I saw the stress. I would go into neighborhoods, for example, in Baltimore. I happened to be in Baltimore when Freddie Gray passed that Sunday, and I immediately went into West Baltimore that Monday. And I've been to Detroit, I've been to those places, but Baltimore is like a third world country. And when I got out of the car, I was so amazed at the landscape. I wasn't really paying too much attention to the people. But when I went over there and tried to talk, I got cussed out. They said, "Get out of here." I don't want to tell you the words. Me, white folks, and the media, we don't want you here, because the only time that you come into our neighborhoods is when you want to talk about something negative. And so I'm kind of like a little girlish, and you had to think real fast. I said, well, I'm from the home of the Civil Rights Movement, Atlanta. I want to tell our stories. I was around gangsters, Crips and Bloods, and they all bowed their head and said, okay. And I'll never forget this. An older woman came up to me. She said, I tell you the truth, I just got out of jail. She said, do you have any money? And I said, ma'am, I don't have any money. I said, I can give you a hug. And we hugged and we cried. So that, I feel that when I see that film with the young people. And that's how I was feeling. Can you imagine me being on the ground for 4 years? It was a shooting after shooting after shooting. I couldn't get fast enough on a plane at all. And you feel the tension in the communities. It's just amazing to me. You have to be in it to really feel it. And it has changed me. It has changed me a lot.
And will continue to, I assume, shape the work that you do to follow for both of you.
Yes.
Because you've been so informed by it. Fahima, what about you? Have you been changed by the very work that you do, or how does it inform your work?
Yeah, I would certainly say so. You know, there was a part in the Don't Be Nice film where the slam coach, Lauren, I believe her name was talking about, you know, using the art form as a way to explore deeper aspects of yourself. And I find that resonated, you know, really greatly with my own approach to my work. And, you know, at a certain point, I've made a very conscious decision that I didn't want to be the kind of artist that told you, you know, this is this. You know, for me, it's more of an interrogation. You know, every subject matter that I'm working on, every project that I'm working on, I'm asking myself a series of questions through the pieces because I think that invites a greater sense of dialogue. People don't want to be beaten over the head with concepts. But if I can create a space where we can enter into a dialogue together and discover new things together, the end result can't be anything less than change. It changes you and it changes your audience.
I was really taken by the film because of the way in which the film was as much about the artists themselves. And I mean, I thought it was really remarkable the way in which they were naked in terms of their own self-discovery, and you were able to capture that on film. And when I think about what we do often as artists, I don't know that we come to the art with that sense of vulnerability, which ultimately they got pushed to through that experience. And I was wondering, for the two of you, that seems to be a very vulnerable place as an artist. It's not just an interrogation, it's kind of digging deep to sometimes discover what you don't want to have to discover. And I was wondering if either of you, Sheila or Fahimu, have had or are having that kind of raw experience, because I was really kind of praying for those young artists, you know, because of the way in which they were pushed to discover the truth in themselves in order to come out with the art, which is not what I think we always do as artists. And so you were able to capture that for us. But I'm wondering, for you all as working artists, is that your experience as well? Because it isn't mine. I think that's one of the reasons I was so taken with it.
I'll share two quick anecdotes around that. When I was a junior in college and really just kind of discovering, you know, what it meant to be a fine artist, because you know, prior to that time, I had always aspired to be a cartoonist. That was my dream since I was like 9 years old. But when I was a junior in college, one night I'm in my dorm room and I'm listening to Goody Mob's first album, Soul Food, and there's a song on the album called Guess Who, where each one of the guys takes turns talking about the impact of their mother's love on them. And I lost my mother when I was 4 years old. You know, she was murdered by my father, you know, and I never really knew her, you know. But I always felt her presence really deep, you know, within me. And so when I was listening to that song, it just reached in and it resonated with me so hard that I literally just started making stuff, you know. I wasn't sure what I was making, I wasn't sure what I was doing, but I spent the next year and a half developing a body of work that told the story of the night that my mother was killed. And that became my senior exhibition, you know, to graduate. And I remember, you know, working with my advisor at that time, and, you know, he kept telling me that I needed to write an artist statement. But I couldn't explain why I was doing what I was doing. Like, I didn't have words for it. It was really personal. You know, most people who knew me had no idea that this was my story, you know. But anyway, when the exhibition opened, you know, I remember watching people walk through the exhibition and, you know, seeing their reactions to it, and people came up to me and shared, you know, how, you know, they had these traumatic experiences in their life and how the work that I did gave them the courage to address, you know, whatever, you know, challenges that they were facing. And it was in that moment that I realized the power of what art can do. You know, like when you're really true and authentic and pure with it, you can really connect to people and you can help people move beyond where they, you know, where they are. And I decided at that point that I didn't want to be an artist that made pretty pictures. I wanted to be an artist that, you know, that made work that would move people and help people, you know. And so that's kind of been my mission as an artist ever since, you know, since that time. The second anecdote that I just wanted to share really quick was that, you know, becoming a father also, you know, really moved me in the type of work, you know, that I began to create. You know, with my daughter, it really gave me the confidence to go forward and take the bold step to actually try to pursue a career as an artist. But with my son, it gave me this, you know, real strong desire to really address the issues of black masculinity, because now I had to raise a black male, right? And I didn't grow up with a father, you know, so I felt at a disadvantage. And I began to use my work in these explorations into questions about what it meant to raise a black man as a way to connect to my son, but also to connect to other black men out there who didn't have fathers in their lives.
That's very powerful. That's very powerful. And yeah, I thank you just for the openness to share, because sometimes I think we create our own kind of mask, if you will, to make sure we don't let people in. But this kind of revelation, I think, is an inspiration to all of us, artists and non-artists alike. Sheila?
I think for me, I'm doing a lot of reflecting because I'm a daughter of a soldier. And my experience as a child growing up in Germany, and I think this is why I do the work that I do now, is when I was in Germany at 6 years old, we would go to the Germantown. I was around a lot of diversity now, but the German kids call us the N-word. And that hurt me so bad, I wanted to be Jewish, not black, at that time. And my mother would take us on the train, and people always wanted to touch our hair and our skin, and as a small child, you don't really understand that. So moving up to me going to college, very shy and very introverted, believe it or not. I would stay in the room and read books, and my father would always buy me all of these books. And it wasn't until my last year in college I took a photography course, because I wouldn't speak to anybody. And that was my tool to speak through there. And that's how I got involved. And I think a lot of my work deals with, even though they're black bodies, I'm trying to show the universal commonality of everybody. And because a lot of times we all have egos, and we can't get past our egos. And if we could kind of destruct that and look at ourselves, I think we could be, you know, a little bit better. I don't know. I don't know. The question that I'm asking myself now is, who are we?
Indeed. Ms. Atkinson, in the clip from Sheila's short, Martin Luther King said something about we're at a new point in the movement, and I thought that was really prophetic in some ways, because I think we're still at a new point, and especially given the powerful words of Baldwin. I'm curious, what is your take on where we are at this moment? You've been documenting the culture. You are slightly a little bit younger than some of your colleagues on this roster. So I want your take on the present. What moment are we at? How would you describe it? Since you've been doing this, you've been telling the stories through documentaries.
Wow, that's heavy. I mean, I think we're at the beginning. I mean, it's 2018, that movie was made in 2016, and not a lot has changed. So I think it's important for us to have a film like what we did, what you guys are doing, and continue to have these messages pushed out for people to see, make people feel uncomfortable, because this is what is happening. This is the real world. And so I sadly don't think it has moved very far. I think a lot of voices are out there and people are saying it, but you know, when we were doing test screenings, a lot of people had forgotten about these people dying, which was unconscionable, but also people move on with their lives. They get doing all these other things, and they're not thinking about what is killing our communities, what's killing our world. And so I think we need to have more of these movements, different art, music, you know, dance, film, whatever it is, whatever is going to get people to change and to move society, because it's not getting any better. And if this is a small way that we can help make it better, then that's what I want to continue to do. And I think that that's important for the artists to step up, you know. It's also the lawyers, the business owners, it's everyone needs to play their role into changing this, because this can't continue to happen, in my opinion. But it can't just be our artistry, it has to be everyone pushing forward. So I think we're at the beginning of it, and hopefully this will make an impact.
At the beginning all over again.
Yeah.
I want to say something about that, if I may. I think 2 years ago, Harry Belafonte was here, and he had a concert called Many Rivers to Cross. Did anybody know about that? While everybody was down partying, we were up on the hill. You have Van Jones, Jesse Williams, Tamir Rice's mother, Angela Davis. He sat us all down, and he told us a little story about how he got into the movement. And he said Martin Luther King had called him and asked him would he serve into the movement, and he was kind of like tickled pink about that. And he said, why me? He said, because artists are the gatekeepers of the truth. And I feel with art and what we do, and we may not look at it as activism, we could speak to masses of people that way, whether we're in the galleries, the museums, but even out in the street with the masses of the people. And I think he told us all, he said, I brought you all here together because he says, I'm tired. He said, I'm tired of black bodies and brown bodies being killed. And he charged us all and said, what are you going to do?
Artists as gatekeepers.
Artists are the gatekeepers of the truth.
That's powerful. That's powerful. In the Don't Be Nice, there was an interesting moment for me early on in the film where, as the coach, the mentor was saying, you know, we don't want to be rehearsing just so we can get an applause, a reaction. We want to go for saying something. And that kind of caused me to think about the way in which in popular culture, you know, for many of us that are in the music business, our success is driven by how many records we've sold, or, you know, how popular we are. But at the same time, I don't know that all of our success commercially means that we're creating important art that's gatekeeping the truth. So I'm curious, from all of you, really, you know, how do you see yourself? Because one of my concerns is always commerce. Commerce has not always been the friend of African Americans, and there's a way in which things get commodified and the truth gets lost somewhere in the midst of all this great creativity that gets co-opted and corrupted. So I'm curious how you see it. Maybe I'm being overly cynical. It is Sunday after all, so you know.
I understand about commerce, and with me as an artist, I'm not represented by a gallery because it's all about selling. My stuff, a lot of people can't, I don't know, I'm just saying, I might be just assuming this. Galleries, I guess, it's maybe too political, okay? It's not the pretty pictures, you know? But I told myself, because my father taught me this, when one door closes, another one will open. And I have to speak true to heart, and that's why I do the work that I do. And it's amazing because I'm still in museums, galleries. I'm doing a lot of work right now without the gallery. Not saying that I don't want one, but I don't look at it that way. And I really like, the lady said, do you want to win or do you want to, yeah. And because in America, we basically, it's all about winning. Okay, and it's, to me, it's not all about when. Yeah, we need money, but when are we going to take a stand? I'm around young people a lot, and they are traumatized, terrorized, and they were brought up about winning. We have to win, and they can't handle it. They cannot handle it. My next work is going to be about trauma.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, I agree. I think, you know, I always say that it would be amazing if, you know, our entertainers, you know, realize the power of their art over the value, you know, over the money part of it. You know, if you, you know, I joke around sometimes and say, like, you know, being an artist is like having a superpower, you know, and with great power comes great responsibility. And so, you know, for me, you know, you know, I have gallery representation and I, you know, do all this kind of stuff. But the people that I work with are very clear that, you know, Fahamu is on a mission. I'm not just here to make pretty pictures. You know, my work is a dialogue, it's a conversation, and I have to stay true to that. You know, this is, for me, it's a divine act. To be able to create. And, you know, again, there's a responsibility that I feel as an artist to use my position, to use this power in the service of people, not just for myself.
In a moment, I want to ask if there are any questions, but just to this point, and I'd like to hear from all of you. So given what we've just been talking about, how do you know if you're successful, or when are you successful? When do you know, okay, I'm a success? What's the criteria for each of you?
I don't know that I even think about it in those terms necessarily, but I try very hard to honor, you know, the words that my grandfather gave me before I left to go away to college. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I had aspirations of being a cartoon animator, and my grandfather was like really old school, you know, South Carolina dude. He barely spoke, but when he spoke, you know, you listened, right? And he asked me before I left, he was like, so what are you gonna be doing in college? And I told him cartoon animation, and he was like, I don't really know nothing about that, you know. But what I do know is whatever you do in life, be the best at it. You know, if you're gonna mop floors better than anybody ever mopped the floor before. If you're gonna paint pictures better than anybody ever painted before. But if you're not gonna give it your best, you're wasting your time and everybody else's. And so for me, success is being my best, giving my best self in everything that I do. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters, and that's all that counts.
Very wise. What about,
I think success for me is when people get it. Like, as a filmmaker, you're often in a silo by yourself or with your team, and you think we're making something amazing and this is going to be great and the world needs to see it. But if no one understands it and no one gets it, then to me that's not a success. So when I come to things like this, or when I hear from people and they say, I get it and I know what you're trying to do, that to me is success. When people just understand what you're trying to do and show them something different, that's to me the best success. And it doesn't matter if it makes a dime or not, as long as people get it, because I want people to understand my art, and that's important because you spend so much time on this for a little bit of money. You don't, you're not a documentary producer because you want to be rich. So, you know, I have other streams of income for that. I do this for the love of art and telling people's stories, and I'm passionate about that, and that's what's important to me. That's how I measure my success.
Thank you.
I agree with both of them. And with the work that I do, when I can inspire a young person, I'm successful with that.
When you're making that connection.
With that connection.
Yeah, I hear that. I wanted to make sure, it's been a full afternoon, but I wanted to make sure that we had time to get some questions or comments from the audience. And so I assume this microphone is set up so that we can take some questions. But please, I'd love to make sure we can keep this dialogue going, because we're really blessed to have these wonderful artists here. Yes, ma'am.
So I was in ICP one day, and I went downstairs to see that film, so the International Center of Photography in New York. So, you know, we're very proud of you. Is my mic on?
I don't think
image on it.